Welcome to the Susie Q Center. My name is Pat Bond. I'm a Marine Safety Lieutenant for the City of Laguna Beach. Thank you for attending. We certainly appreciate it. If you guys didn't know, we're at the Storm Preparedness Workshop. And tonight we'll have a few speakers. We will have Jordan Villa. He's our Emergency Operations Coordinator. We'll have Chief Kevin Snow, Chief of Marine Safety. We'll have Jeff Latenders, Chief of Laguna Beach Fire. And we'll have Alex Hardy. He's a meteorologist for the National Weather Service. Just some housekeeping. If you guys need to use the restroom, please do so. It's down the hall on the left-hand side. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jordan Villa, our Emergency Operations Coordinator.
Let's see if I can keep your guys' attention for this whole presentation. All right, as Kai introduced, my name is Jordan Villalock. I'm the Emergency Operations Coordinator. It's actually a new position with the City of Laguna Beach this fiscal year, so I'm really excited to take on and help everyone be prepared, especially for this impending El Nino that's coming up. So my part of the presentation is to talk to everybody about what they can do before the storm, what you guys can go home tonight and do this next week, the next couple months before the rain really starts. The first part about being prepared is you actually need to know what your hazards are. Here in Laguna Beach, we have a ton of hazards. We have tsunamis, we have wildfires, we have floods, we have earthquakes. Those are just to name a few of them that we have. So depending on where you live in the city of Laguna Beach, really depends on how you need to prepare. If you live in the canyons, you're going to be susceptible to flooding. If you live up on top of the world, you might be more susceptible to the wildland fires. Or if you live down on the sand, obviously the tides as well as the tsunamis that are going to impact. So you really need to know what your hazards are to better prepare. I'm going to talk about warning systems. I'm going to talk about evacuation routes and the sheltering. Those are kind of the big topics that I'm going to cover. The first part about being prepared is you need to have a disaster plan in place. You can go to this website that's up there, readyoc.org. There's actually a quick link that you can click and we'll give you a checkoff list where you're going to be able to work through this and so you can plan for your family how to be prepared. A couple of highlighted items that I want to talk about is the out-of-town contact. This is extremely important during a disaster, is to have this out-of-town contact that's already figured out with your family. For me, my out-of-town contact is my wife's grandmother in South Dakota. When a disaster happens, the communication lines locally are going to be down. You're not going to be able to call locally. So you need to have that out-of-town contact so you can call them and let them know, hey, I'm okay. When my wife calls, she'll pass that message along. It's really important to have this person already identified. Another important part is text messaging is way more important to use during a disaster than phone calls. Phone calls aren't going to go through when you try, right after a disaster. Social media will work, and so will text messages. This is because it takes less bandwidth to pass that message through rather than a phone call. So that's the best way to communicate with your loved ones. And lastly, like everything, you need to practice your plan. You need to figure out and make sure that everybody is on the same page on what you're going to do during a disaster. Next thing I'm going to talk about is Alert OC. Who here knows what Alert OC is? Is everybody? This has been around for quite a few years now, so everyone should be on board with what it is, but it's our mass notification system. This is how we will communicate with residents in the event of a disaster. We've used it recently for the tsunami advisory that Alex Hardy so gratefully put out for us. We did communicate that message. And also in July, we used it to communicate regarding the fire in the canyon that happened that impacted everyone. So we currently have everyone's home number. Who has a home phone that they actually answer in here? You guys are the few, let me tell you. So what we encourage all the residents, if you have a landline, we have all those phone numbers already built into the database. So what we're asking you guys to go home and do is to add your cell phone number, your text numbers, your email addresses into the system. This way that when we have a disaster, there's many different platforms that we can communicate you to. It could take a couple hours once we send out the message for all the phone messages to go across. But it will be much quicker for us to send text messages or emails. Or perhaps your phone call won't go through. So make sure you have a couple different plans there in place to get the message from us. So please go register your information there. alertoc.com, it's really simple. Another question that Chief Lieutenant is going to cover a little bit later, but being prepared is making sure you have sandbags on hand if you're in the flood-prone areas and you've lived in your homes. If you have a while or you haven't, make sure you communicate with your neighbors if you haven't lived there a while to figure out where the water runs, where the issues are in your neighborhood, or if you've been there, you're well aware what the problems are. So make sure you take care of those in advance. Okay, emergency kit. It's pretty simple. I'm sure you guys have heard this thousands of times, but you want to make sure you prepare for your family, yourself and your family for 72 hours. You're going to need a gallon of water per day per person. You're going to also want to have food on hand, non-perishable. If you do, purchase the cans. Make sure you have a can opener. You don't want to be caught without that can opener if that's all the food you have. We also encourage you to have battery-powered or hand-cranked radio, NOAA radio, so you can get that information through us, as well as a flashlight and extra batteries. If you guys do have a flashlight that you don't intend to use on day-to-day purpose, if you're going to store it away in your go kit, make sure you switch the batteries around backwards so it doesn't suck the juice out as much as if you have them in the regular way. So that will help you guys out keeping them. Also a first aid kit. In a disaster, you want to make sure that you have something to help you out if you have scratches or wounds that you can cover up to make sure that they don't get infected. Cash is king when it comes to a disaster. ATM machines aren't going to work. You're not going to be able to use your credit card. Make sure you have some cash on hand. Wrench, pliers to shut off your utilities if necessary, as well as prescription medications if you have those. Make sure you don't wait till that last day to get them refilled. Make sure you have some on hand there to take care of yourself if something happens. I did put a whistle here. It's always nice to have in case you get trapped. And lastly is the important documents, family documents. What I do, and works well for me, is I took the time to scan and upload all the important documents, my insurance, birth certificates, all that information that you want to keep, and I loaded it onto a thumb drive. I have it in my Go Kit. I update it every year, and I have it on there password protected in case I lose it, which is a good likelihood of me doing. So you have all that information there, so if you need to leave, it's all there right there for you. So that's a nice way. Some people put them in the waterproof containers or whatever works for you, but I found that to be helpful for me. Also with emergency kits, make sure you take care of your pets as well. They're going to need water and food too. If you have young children, you know, if you have an infant, they're probably not going to eat the black beans, so make sure you take care of them also in your plan. Or elderly family members that you're taking care of. Okay, back to the public notification systems. How are we going to notify the residents when they need to hear some information from the officials? The primary notification system is Alert OC. We're also going to use the media. 93.5, I've done a few interviews during some of these events that we've had recently, and we're going to continue to do so. So we will pass that information along through 93.5 as well as press releases through the local media. Social media is also great. Who has Facebook in here? Does everyone pretty much have a Facebook? Some of you do. If you haven't yet, like the city of Laguna Beach, we pass a lot of information from every department in our city along through our Laguna Beach Facebook account. It's a good way to get information. To bring it down simpler, we will also use the vehicle PA systems in our emergency vehicles that could be notified neighborhoods if we're asking people to evacuate or not. We can also do the door-to-door canvassing. That's where you might see some of our CERT volunteers or our senior volunteers going out and talking to people if we need to tell them something. These are some important parts that I thought that I was going to discuss tonight because these are the questions I'm getting asked. So when it comes to flood waters, anything that's higher than your ankles, you don't want to get near. It's pretty simple. 6 inches can swiftly sweep you off your feet. You can be in trouble then. If you're driving, it's not really cool to drive through a huge flooded area. I know when I was 16, I thought it was really cool to drive through the big puddles, and it's not really a good idea here. So if you are caught in a flooded area, we ask you just to seek higher ground, get out of your vehicle, or if it's a flooded area, turn back and go the other way. You don't want to drive through that. Most cars, as here's the stat, that most cars can be swept away with less than 2 feet of moving water. This is important for those with children. They're very curious. Make sure that you keep them safe around the water because they're going to want to go down there and they're not going to understand how dangerous it is. We also have some videos that Chief Lieutenant will show, but it is especially dangerous during the dark time. when you're trying to look at these floodwaters, it can be really dangerous because you're not going to be able to see what they're actually doing. Evacuation and sheltering. Really depends on where the incident is, what type of incident that we're working is how we're going to evacuate. Here in Laguna Beach, we all know there's 3 ways in and 3 ways out. That's it. Typically, one of them is going to be impacted by whatever disaster. Through Alert OC, we do have the ability to notify individual neighborhoods. So we might tell one group of neighbors to go northbound Coast Highway, where the others we might notify to go southbound Coast Highway. This way that we can alleviate the traffic and get people through. It's one of the new technologies that we're able to do. We want to tell people that if they're in danger, if they feel like they've been through these floods before, the water's rising, you know what happens, don't wait to hear from us. Leave early. You can go whenever you'd like. If it's dangerous, go. Please do. Don't wait to hear from us. With sheltering locations, the Susie Q Center this last year actually went through the American Red Cross review, and it is now an approved shelter that we could stand up in the event that we need it. We do have Laguna Beach High School, Dane Hills High School, through an MOU that we can use them as well. But again, it depends on what we're dealing with, what shelter we're going to go ahead and activate. So all that information, if it's necessary, will be shared with you. And lastly, I'm going to plug my CERT program. How many CERT members do I have? Look at that. Thank you, Chief. This is a collaborative effort from the police and fire department that we have the community emergency response team. It's taught by, like I just said, the police and fire department officials. It's over 25 hours of FEMA certified training. Some of the training classes we cover are up there, but search and rescue, fire suppression, disaster preparedness is all covered. We're actually just finishing up our 7th class here in the city with over 200 graduates. So anybody that's interested in taking the CERT class, I have interest cards in the back. The next one will probably start at the beginning part of the year. And that concludes my presentation. I'll go ahead and pass it on over to Kai.
Thank you very much, Jordan. We really appreciate it. Our next speaker is representing where all of these elements converge. The flood, the high surf, and all the rest of the rainwater somehow always make it to the beach. And that's the introduction. Kevin Snow, Chief of Marine Safety.
Well, this is not going to be us. This woman started off her day probably thinking about sitting down on the couch and having a cup of tea. And surprise, I really don't know what this actual is happening, but I'm envisioning a wave coming through her window. So we're here. This is not going to happen. Okay, so we're going to talk about what to expect based on some previous events, storm awareness, and storm preparations relating to the beach and ocean environment. Okay, so what are we going to expect? We expect coastal erosion caused by large surf, storms, and flooding. As you can see down here at Crescent Bay, back in 2010, we lost close to 15 feet of sand in less than 24 hours. So that's a substantial amount of Mother Nature doing her work down there. Bluebird Crest Street. I don't think that those chairs are probably going to be there tomorrow. Surf and sand looks like they may need to pull those back. So again, we're losing a substantial amount of sand in a short period of time. Fortunately for Laguna, most of our residents are up off of the beach. They're up a little bit higher. We do have a few places of concern. But if you're an oceanfront resident, you should be aware of when these storms occur. We're also going to have large surf events, wind-driven surf, and with high tides, we're going to have the surf and the run-up will be exceeding the levels where we're normally at. Main Beach, back in 2010. Again, in some areas, 15 feet of sand, less than 24 hours. This is the outfall. This is a place that you don't want to be. For some reason, everybody wants to come down and get to Main Beach and check it out, walk on the boardwalk. We're strongly encouraging you not to come down. And we'll be closing it and most of the time, or whenever it looks like there's a potential for a hazard. Again, Main Beach coastal erosion, this is water flowing out as well as the surf and high tides pushing up into the creek. Victoria Beach, another thing that can occur down on the beach is we'll have these small landslides, some larger than others, but be careful if you're down the beach after storms. The coastal erosion can include the giving way of the bluffs. Again, over at Rockledge. So this is a relatively common occurrence. Treasure Island 2010, morning after the big rain. We lost close to 15 feet of sand in that area as well. At this time, we were down there closing the ramp, but be aware. You shouldn't be going to the beach, but if you're going to walk down the ramp, that last step may or may not be there based on the sand level. You're going to expect to have large surf. Every one of these storms, and we're expected to have many more storms than we normally have, and Alex is going to get into that, is going to bring a surf event. Consistent surf, so surf for days and days and days. We're going to have surf days before the storm, surf during the storm, and surf after the storm. And so for some people, that's really good news. But for most people, we want you to not come to the beach. I mean, it's hard to say, but please don't come to the beach when we're having these events. Okay, here's another good reason. What we're going to wind up with is a large amount of debris in our ocean. Everything that's been swept downstream, not just from our city, but from other locations, can wind up in the surf, in the ocean, and on the beach. These are dumpsters that have made their way down through the channel onto Main Beach back in 2010. That's a beautiful sunset with a dumpster. Another dumpster. I like that picture. It was a little rabbit. I'm sure that came from somewhere in the Philippines. I had a dumpster in a cave. So there's going to be a lot of stuff left over from the storm days after these storm events. And even though the surf may be good, there's still going to be many warnings in effect. There's going to be the health issues associated with it, and there's also the threat of physical harm if you collide with one of these objects. Just some more photos. Rockpile Beach back in 2010. Hopefully you didn't get down here to see it because you did what we don't want you to do. So we'll take some pictures for you and we'll put them in a place where you can check it out. Okay, so what we're asking for you to do is basically stay off the beach, stay off the rocks especially. I know this is a Laguna Beach crowd and we all know that, but we do need to spread the word that you don't go out onto the rocks or onto the beach during these large surf and storm events. And tragically, we do have it happen. So we'll take a little look back in time. This is 97, 98 boardwalk damage, substantial damage. We saw the 2010 damage. A lot of energy going into this area. This person here, I don't know who they are, but they chose to walk through this, and this is more than ankle deep, and they're putting themselves in jeopardy of being swept off their feet into that area that we just looked at. It looks innocent enough. So then you would go through this and out into this little hydraulic, and that's absolutely not going to be any fun. And so if there's any possibility of flooding, you're going to want to move to high ground. This woman obviously didn't attend, and she probably went downtown instantly enough to go and grab some groceries. Just not a good idea. I think the level of awareness for this coming year is much higher than it has been in the past. We are aware that there is potential for these types of things to happen, and we're strongly encouraging people to stay home if they can, and if they are involved in a flooding event, to move to higher ground. And that's the last slide. Thank you.
And on to our next chief, Jeff Latendresse, the beach fire.
Thank you, Greg. And what has been really discovered, we got into a lot of introduction about the safety chief being involved in the water, and for me, it's just Jeff.
That works for me.
Randy, quick survey. Who was here in 2010? Okay. Who was here in 97, 98? Okay. Who was here in 95? Okay. And so as we go back, our typical rainfall that we get should be on average of about 12 to 13 inches a year. That's what we get. But if you look at this chart, in those years that we've had El Nino occurrences, our rainfall is almost double. We're over 20 inches in some of those events. In 2010, it actually was about a week of storms that led up to December 22nd at 2 o'clock when a cell cancer just knocked us flat on our back. And it was a really incredible one. And we have some video of that. And I'm going to go through and show you several slides of some of our firefighters and what we picked up from some residents so that we can get an idea of what can happen in the canyon. You need to understand the hydrology of the canyon. It is not designed to handle significant rainfall. And when we get a cell coming through, that's going to dump, and I was talking to one of our meteorologist friends, and he told us 3 inches of rain on a day in California is a lot of rain. And when you get 3 inches of rain in an hour, it really puts a burden on it. And when we talk about, 10, 50-year floods, when you're going to get that kind of rain in a very confined period of time, it just overwhelms the system. Kevin had a lot of neat pictures of dumpsters. Part of the problem with our drainage system in the canyon, though, is those dumpsters and that material gets into the channel, and if it blocks it, now we have significant problems. And if we dissect what happened in 2010, a lot of the problems we have are because of debris, as well as vehicles, and we'll see some of that, got into the channel, blocked the channel, and caused a lot of the flooding. So, maybe time. The first flood, this may not be the first one, but we found some historical photos. Oh, I'm sorry. I think the first. Some historical photos of a flood in Laguna Canyon in 1838. And if you look at it, I think you'll be able to pick up Big Bend. And as you're coming into town on the right side, after the Nathan Bend, you'll see where the art college is today. So there we are, going around Big Bend, now we're coming in, we're going to make that left, the art college would be up on the right. So again, why is it a canyon? Well, because water flows through it. What is the only natural lake in Orange County? Bear Canyon. So where's the water going to go? It's going to go to the ocean, right? It's natural. So we can't stop it. So this is 2010 November fire agents at the hospital. For those that picked up on Wilson, that was one of our firefighters from the Tom Hanks movie when he lost his little volleyball in the ocean. The water is almost wall-to-wall in the canyon, and it's about 3 to 4 feet deep, and it's moving 10 to 15 miles an hour. You get into that water, you think, well, it's not 3 feet, it's not that deep, right? For sure, like most of it's really, but, for someone like Kyle or, a tall person, I could just walk through that. You can't just walk through that. You get swept away, and as Kevin showed you, the end part of this canyon, of this river, is not a fun place to try to go through. It's what we call hydraulic. And so here's a picture as the sun was coming up in 2010. So the water subsiding now, the river has now stopped. If you look back on it, I don't know if Alex remember, these thought there was going to be another sun coming in at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that was going to be a significant problem for us. But fortunately, that sun went south and it missed us. Now, as firefighters, if you live in one area of the same valley, you're not going to get there. You're not going to get out. And so, as Jordan talked about, with our ability to see and forecast the weather that's going on, the city's going to take a proactive position this year. We're the carbon regulations. And if you don't do, you just look at your stone, they're not coming even get you. We have to wait for the water to die down, and then we can, some of the bridges, we have to get the bridges inspected before we can even cross the bridges after that much water has been going over the bridges. And so it's going to be a period of time before it can get in there. Maybe start driving down the road now, but you can still see the channel, the creek is still overflowing, and the bridges still have water going over the top of it. And we have to ensure that when we have 35, 40,000 pound fire engines, if we're going to cross those bridges, that they're safe for us to cross. This was taken from a resident of the house about trees looking, and that's what I said that the reason is, you know, I think it was Jordan talked about, you need to know at your house where water flows. So that when significant water comes through, where do I put the sandbags? And so they're looking at it and saying, okay, it's like in the rain, well, we've got some issues here, I hope the rain doesn't come. And spend a minute with me and watch what happens when it starts raining, and it's not just raining where you're at. Remember, our watershed goes all the way up to the 73, almost to the 405. And so the Laguna Canyon takes all that rain from that area, channels it into the canyon, and we have to deal with that. This is taken from inside their house going through their carport. Okay, there's a lot of water going through here, folks. 3:30 in the morning now.
Where is this?
It's out in the canyon. Is that amazing? That's about 4 feet high water. And so again, we can't stop this. Nature is going to take its course. We need to be prepared. As Jordan says, in the fire service, we have ready, set, go. And so the ready part is what we're doing today. We're planning for an event. We're establishing our plans. The ready, set part is, okay, now it's ready. Now my go bag is packed. You know, I've got my contacts and everything like that. And when the fire department and the police department says go, we're evacuating. And, you know, it's a great line. Don't wait for us to say go. If you're in this house, you should be leaving before this period of time. Okay? Because we're just not going to before we get there. Is the canyon the only problem with Laguna Beach? No, it's not. This is in North Laguna. That's not normally going down the street. That's not normal for us. Okay?
That's a lovely native vegetation.
That's why they're doing field application. How about that? By the high school in 2010, we had significant problems by the high school. If we go back to 1997 and 1998, we had about 300 landslides in 1997 and 1998. Why did we have the landslides then?
Fire.
The fire, correct. In 1993, we had the Laguna fire. And for the dark sky to heal, for the vegetation to take hold and to be strong enough to support this kind of rain, the geologists tell us it takes about 5 years. Okay? So in 97, 98, we were almost there. We got hit with an window, and that's why we had all of those landslides. And unfortunately, in all of that, we lost 2 lives in the 97, 98 rain and flooded in Laguna Beach. And both of those, unfortunately, were in the canyon. So, we know our hazards. Jordan talked about that. We need to know what we need to be prepared for. We're focusing here on the winter storms. What Alex is going to tell us is about zero or whatever they're calling it now. And so our city is being very proactive in trying to prepare the city for response and trying to prepare our residents to be ready for it. So what can you do? You know, there's things that you can do at your house. Your rain gutters, have you cleaned them out? The downspouts, is the area clear below the downspouts? Have you moved valuable items out of the way, and are they in low-lying areas? Maybe you need to get them up out of those low-lying areas, because we've seen the pictures of debris on the beach. Water will move this stuff. It will take it away and it will flow it downstream. You need to work with your neighbors. If you're gonna put sandbags, remember, if you're diverting something out of your house, are you pushing it to someone else's house? Or are you just pushing that water to your neighbor's house and creating a problem for them? Okay, I'm okay now, but maybe another one on the road. So you have to look and see where you're channeling that water, so you're not making another problem just somewhere else. Place the sandbags ahead of the storm, and I'll get into the sandbags in just a little bit on how you film and all that stuff. Cars. We take our cars for granted. Kevin likes to drive through puddles, but there's hazards there. We could have sinkholes. The road could give away. The integrity of the road could give away. If you're walking out there, storm drains. That bubbling water is a storm drain that the manhole cover has popped. And now you have a hole there. So if you're walking around and you fall into that, you're gone. There's a couple cars in our canyon from 2010 that are in the creek. Physically moved and in the creek. So you see those storm drains along the curb, that's not a good place to park your car, because your car could possibly block that storm drain and inhibit the flow, or if it's going to start moving, if that storm drain gets blocked and water builds up, it can really push your car. So you want to try to keep your car in a high spot too, because again, our channel is already substandard. Getting the dirty and cars and dumpsters in it only makes it worse. Education. So what does the city have to prepare? Well, we're here tonight. We're educating the public on what they can do. We're educating the public on what we've done. When our peers in the fire department, we're sharing what the city of Laguna Beach is doing, and our peers are going, well, you guys are really being proactive in this. Why are they being proactive? Because we have that history. We know what happened in 2010. We know what happened in 1997, 98. We know what happened in 94, 95, and going back even further. I know Kevin and I were here for all of those ones, and I'm sure people were here for previous areas prior to that. So we've seen it happen before. Hopefully, maybe today or this week, you're going to get this mailer to your home. We got it today, and so the city sent out a 4-page mailer to every resident and business in the community, advising them on what to do, talking about a legal scene, talking about all those things that Jordan just talked about on how we can be prepared. And we took advantage. You know what? Alex and I are going to talk about this weekend. You know what? We're going to have Mount Santa Ana's and Lake Humidity again. We could still have a fire season before we get into the rain season. And so hopefully that won't happen, because a fresh burn storm like that going into El Nino could be very, very dangerous. We have embraced planning for the city. This is huge, social media. The city is going to launch a new website in about 2 weeks. And so there'll be a lot of information there on disaster preparedness and flood preparedness. We're working with the local schools and several people from Annalise. I met with Annalise just 3-4 weeks ago, and we're working with them that when the forecast says rain, they're not going to be in school. Because one, in Annalise out of the canyon, they won't be able to get there, but they have their fair share of floods out there too. And it's just not an environment where we want children to be. Terrace drains. If you live on the hillsides, you probably have seen these, up on the hillsides, but typically they're concrete culverts that are put in, so that when water falls down, it'll go in the drain, it will channel it to a normal flow and not allow for ground saturation to unstabilize the hillside. And that lessens the possibility of a landslide or a debris slide. So the city sent notices out to the 250 property owners that we need to go inspect and clean up those terrace drains. And in addition to that, our code enforcement officers and building officials went out there and inspected them. And there was a press release that the city put out in August identifying this work that they were doing there. The floodgates. If you have a business in the downtown, you are required to have floodgates to protect your business. I know in 97, 98, and even in 2010, what used to be the old Big Dog building across the Genesis, that place just got flooded in 97, and then it was a carpet store in 2010. And so after that, we have mandated these floodgates on every business in the downtown. Well, look at this building below it. That's a building in the canyon, And you can see that right there, they've got sandbags over their doors. You know, it's a good idea, and if you're in those flood-prone or prone areas, maybe these floodgates might be something that you want to do at your home too. Because they do make a difference. It's amazing how they keep the water out. We keep the water out, we limit the property damage, we get the business open quicker, and they're able to sustain their livelihood. Another monitoring system. After 2010, one of the things the city did was, well, how can we respond better? We really looked at 2010 and tried to figure out what we could do better from that incident. And one of the things we did in the city's emergency operations center, which is located in City Hall, is we contracted with a vendor to put in a weather monitoring system. Out in the canyon, we have some ground saturation measuring points that tell us how much water is in the ground. In addition to that, we have cameras that are focused on the channel with beat markers indicating how much water is in the channel. We have 5 different rain gauges out there that are part of the city system and part of the Orange County flood control system. And so during a significant storm, we have a person in there monitoring that, looking at what we're getting from the National Weather Service. And when the trigger gets hit, we're going to use Alert OC, and we're going to say, okay, out in the canyon, we've got a cell coming in, the ground is already saturated, we're issuing an evacuation order. We hope you listen to us because we're not going to be able to get there to you. And so those are some of the changes that we did after 2010 to better prepare the city. Laguna channel itself, you need to understand the channel and the configuration of it. Most of it is an earthen channel. From essentially, this is the toll road out on El Toro Road. We have the catch basin there that takes all the water off the toll road. From there, down El Toro, through Eloise, down through the Sun Valley neighborhood, it's just an earthen channel. It doesn't become a concrete channel until about the dog park on Laguna Canyon Road. And then it goes underground for a section through a big bend, and then it goes behind most of the businesses on the south side of the canyon, and it goes all the way behind the businesses, pops out of the city parking lot, goes down basically to beach, and there at beach it goes underground again. And the interesting thing then, you think at the end of the channel it would get wider, well, ours gets narrower. And so if there's any blockage there, that's why the downtown is prone to flooding, is because everything kind of gets smaller while it's trying to get all that water out. So you just need to understand that. And so we have gone through as a city, walk the entire channel, work with the property owners on the private part. When it gets concrete, it becomes part of the Orange County flood control system. And so we've gone through all that and cleaned out that channel. Ironically, some of our homeless individuals like the channel as a nice area to sleep. And, just last week, we were cleaning out some of the debris that they had put in there when they set up their encampments. So we're constantly following through and following up on that. Training, all of our key city staff, all of our department heads participated about a month and a half ago in an EOC, Emergency Operations Center exercise on, guess what, a flood event. And so we spent 3 hours in our EOC going through a scenario where we had basically a 2010 storm come through again, and we acted as we would try to act during that storm. I think the thing that we want to share with everybody is our solution, or way we're going to get better is we're going to be proactive and we need to staff up for the storm. That's something we didn't do in 2010, was the storm happened, and we tried to get everybody back into work, and then you're picking up the pieces. And so we need to be proactive and get people in ahead of time. All of our firefighters, all of our unit safety personnel, and for the first time we brought in our public works personnel. Last week we went through the 6 hours of swift water awareness training. 3 hours was classroom in the morning, and then in the afternoon we went on a tour of the city. Because a lot of our firefighters, along with our unit safety personnel and some of our public works personnel, haven't been here through some of these storms. And we wanted to take them to our problem areas ahead of time so that they understand where they are and what we need to do to resolve the issues in those areas. We talked about sandbags, and so sandbags. every day, 24/7, 365, we have empty sandbags available at every one of our 4 fire stations. Downtown Station 1, what we call the center of the city, Station 2 at 285 Agate Street, up at top of the road at Fire Station 3 by the school, and South Laguna at Station 4. For the first time in trying to understand and learn better, we've done before having sand, and then you fill your own sandbags at the employees' parking lot. Well, this year we're going to try something even better. We're going to have filled sandbags. So you just come, pick up the sandbag, and take it to your house or to your business, and we'll have 2 locations where filled sandbags will be at the corporate yard at 1900 Laguna Canyon Road, and at the Aliso Beach parking lot on the inland side, all the way in the back. So once the first storm comes in about a week before, you'll see those filled sandbags hit those sites, and they'll be available for the public.
How many will be allocated for?
No, it's an honor system. You know, it's not intended for contractors, it's not intended for construction sites, and that happens. We want the public to use what they need and take on what they need. But there's not gonna be a sandbag police officer out there saying, okay, you've exceeded your limit.
Where do you put them?
Where do you put them? I mean, at your house? Well, you would have to figure that out on your own. If you know historically where water has gotten in, you would want to protect that area with the sandbags. So, unfortunately, you almost need to have history to know where the water flows around your house. So how will the city respond during the storm? Well, first we're going to be monitoring the weather. We need to know what's going on. The first or second storm of the season might not be a bad thing for us. But as the ground starts getting saturated, well, then it becomes more critical. So we're going to be monitoring, we're going to be working with the National Weather Service, we're going to be working with the meteorologists that we have been consulting with, and they're going to tell us, okay, you know, we've got a cell coming in, we've had this much rain. Again, we look at 2010, it was on about day 7 of a week of rain when we got in trouble, and it was when we got 6 or 7 inches of rain in one night that we had all the problems that we had. Based off of these triggers, each department is going to staff up as appropriate. The fire department's going to add 2 more engines or 50% more staffing in. We're going to bring people into the emergency operations center and the department operations center. Marine safety is going to bring in 2 extra personnel, 2 extra units, which are 3 personnel each. So 6 personnel and staff those 2 extra units. We're going to have extra people in dispatch, extra police officers, extra public works personnel, so that we can respond and try to clear drains, keep water flowing while the storm is going on. Again, if we look back at what we did in 2010, I think we had our normal on-duty staffing of firefighters and police officers, no additional marine safety personnel, and I think we had 2 public works personnel in a pickup truck, and that was our preparation. And so I think we're going to be much better, I know we're going to be much better as we get into this year. We're going to form up as what we call a task force. And so in this task force, we're going to have a fire engine, a marine safety vehicle, and a public works vehicle, and they're going to get dispatched to an incident. They're going to have the resources, hopefully, to either deal with it or make a determination that they need more resources. And we're going to have 2 of these task forces set up and pre-positioned out in the canyon prior to the storm going in. We're going to divide the city up into 5 geographical areas, or what we call divisions, and someone will be in charge of those divisions. And as they need resources, they'll contact the EOC or the Department Operations Center and request those resources. So we have a plan on how we're going to respond. It's not just going to be the 911 operator taking a call, okay, there's flooding, and dispatching the closest fire engine. You also need to understand, though, that if you have flooding in your house, that's a low-level emergency for us. We may not respond for a period of time. We're going to be responding to major events that are going on in the city. So it's just, that's why it's important for you to be prepared on your own. I just talked about this, but pre-positioning personnel and predetermined safe areas, we're going to issue evacuation orders. We sure hope you listen to us when we say go, know where to go. If you don't have a place to go, we've been working with the Red Cross. We've got shelter supplies here. This facility will open up. You might have friends in dry areas or not flooded areas of the city. And so those would be places that we could go. What we won't do is we're not going to drive through knee-deep water. It's just not safe for us. We're not going to cross a bridge that had water flowing over it like we saw in the video until that bridge is inspected to make sure that our 40,000 gallon fire engine doesn't collapse the bridge because it was moved off of its foundation by the force of the water. You know, a person like this one in the car here, we're going to see if there is a way for us safely to get to that person. But we're not going to walk through a dry area through that much water and get that person off of that car. We can't risk our personnel. We might need to call in resources from outside the area, from the Orange County Fire Authority, to call in what we call a swiftwater rescue team. May take a little bit of time. You need to understand what we can and what we cannot do. So, why can't we just go out there and try to rescue some people? Well, because then the rescuer becomes the rescue. Here's a picture from 2014 of a rescuer that got swept away, and now the rescuers are trying to rescue the rescuer. You can see how fast the water is moving. This person has a personal flotation device on, a helmet on, a wetsuit on, and he's in trouble. First attempt, that guy was lucky, he was tied off, you can see the rope behind him, or he could have gone into the stone or into the creek and had another victim himself. So this guy's going to go and throw his rope bags. We can do this. Our firefighters and road safety personnel have these devices. We can make rescues from dry land, but we can't make rescues from the water. So this was a successful attempt of saving that rescue. And the rescue. There's the short one. The point of what we have to try to make is we have to have respect for water and Mother Nature. And while it may not look like a big deal, you know, what's underneath that water, what's in that water, it's more than what you think. And that's why we have to be cautious as we move in there. There'll be questions after Alex is done. But here was a nice graphic that was in the register after the 2010 flood, and it really goes through and dissects our canyon and talks about the hydrology, how it narrows and everything like that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief Preparedness. Our last speaker will be meteorologist Alex Hardy from the National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. A lot of great photos, and you're probably wondering, you know, how do we know or how do we have any confidence that we might see something like that in their area in the near future? I'm going to go over a lot of slides to show you kind of where we're coming from, what El Nino is, what it isn't, and what we can expect with at least this year's upcoming El Nino. Thanks. So I'm a meteorologist at the National Weather Service. We're down in Rancho Bernardo in San Diego County. We cover all of Orange County, all of Riverside, San Bernardino, and of course San Diego County. We're a 24/7 operation, so we're always there, even when it's partly cloudy and 70. There's a meteorologist there, or 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a meteorologist there. Why? Well, because part of what we do is activate the emergency alert system, and it could be for anything from a tsunami to a flash flood, like all the videos and photos you've seen. It could be a dam break. It could be an Amber Alert. How many of you have gotten Amber Alerts on your phone? Those come directly from the National Weather Service using information from the California Highway Patrol. So since we have access to the emergency alert system, we can get information out quick. And now that we have the wireless emergency alert system as well, you don't even have to subscribe. It can get really quickly to you. So if you were to get a message this coming winter and it said flash flood warning, go to higher ground, that is really the time where it's kind of a slap in the head that something bad's going on, not in San Diego necessarily, not in Riverside, but in your area, because we draw a area around where it's affected, and only your cell phone gets picked up in that area. So keep that in mind. We also produce spot weather forecasts, like for the fire agencies, and we produce climate information, like El Nino. I'll talk a lot about that. We also produce daily weather forecasts. Weather.gov is our website, and when you go on there and click, it pops up your 7-day forecast, temperature, precipitation chances, that type of thing. We are actively on social media, Twitter and YouTube as well. So make sure you, following this, you check out weather.gov and click on Orange County. It'll zoom up. Or if you're into Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, we put a lot of information in real time and archived on those sites. Today I'm here to talk to you about El Nino. Is it called Godzilla, I guess? I was invited to a meeting coming up in Pasadena, and I was reading through the agenda. And I just kind of skimmed through, and my son looked at it, he's 10 years old. He said, "Oh look, your title is Hunting Godzilla." I'm like, oh, great. So everyone has a catchphrase, and whatever works, right? Whatever gets your attention. And certainly this El Nino started to get our attention if it hasn't already. What is El Nino? It's actually not rain. It's not a storm. What it is warm ocean temperatures, not in our beaches, but way down in the equatorial Pacific Ocean, far from here. How could that affect us way up here? Well, the tropical oceans, just imagine like a hurricane, how powerful those get. The tropical oceans, even when they're not producing hurricanes, that's where all the power to these storms come from. Tremendous amount of energy in our oceans. When you warm up that ocean, just warm it up a little bit over a large area, you change the weather pattern. So you almost have a change in the climate. Think of it as climate change in the course of one winter. This red line here is the jet stream that brings all our storms. What happens is we take the jet stream from Oregon and Washington during an El Nino year and bring it southward. So we don't create new storms or different storms, or necessarily the worst storms, but we change the storm track to get frequent, numerous storms throughout the whole winter. Here's what it looks like. So all that warm water south of Hawaii, that's what's causing the jet stream to change, and what does end up causing it to change when we get in the heart of the winter, especially the latter half of the winter. Here's where it normally is, and of course it comes down a few times. Hasn't been lately. Most of us aren't used to any rain since the images they showed in 2010. It's been 5 years, any significant rain. In some cases, even longer. So what's going on in our oceans? On the left-hand side, here's our El Nino zone. Then we have, for lack of a better scientific term, 2 blob areas. NASA came up with that. I'm not kidding, you can Google it. And all this warm water here was already there before El Nino even formed. So we'll explain a little bit of what that might mean to our local weather down here. Now typically this is what it looks like with El Nino. That's your textbook El Nino. You don't have nearly as much warm water as you have here. So before we jump into El Nino too much, have you noticed how warm it's been? Have you noticed it's been a little muggy at times? Have you noticed there hasn't been any clouds in terms of like the stratus marine clouds? All that blob warm water has changed our climate over the past 2 years to where we're looking at conditions, not quite, but more similar to like Florida and Hawaii. Incredible warmth coming out of just our local ocean waters. And this here shows it. This is the course of just the summer. And that's every day averaged together. And you can see the axis of humidity and the axis of warmth is right over us in Southwest California. Now, this is pretty staggering. This is hot off the press, so no pun intended. So the month of October is going down in the record books as the hottest ever on our immediate coastline. And no coincidence, that's where all our warm water is. Take a look at some of these numbers. So when you start talking about 3 degrees over the course of a whole month, that's okay, nothing to brag about. You probably won't notice it that much. When you start talking about 5 or 6, it's noticeable. When you wake up in the morning, afternoon, you're trying to do exercise, walk the dog, maybe your electric bill, if you do have AC. When you start talking about 7, 8 degrees, it's off the charts. We shattered the month of October with the warmth. We had low temperatures in the mid-70s. You have to go to Hawaii and Texas to see that, or to feel that. And it's not comfortable when it lasts day after day. So we had an incredible month, and all that warmth was attributed up here due to the severe drought, and down here largely due to our very warm ocean temperatures. The lightning you saw last night, did it seem a little unusual to see lightning? Even in November? Even in a good storm? That lightning and the fact that we're able to generate that many thunderstorms, it wasn't just here. It was all the way down the coast to the Mexican border. It can largely be attributed to how warm that water is. When you have warm water, the atmosphere loves that. It's unstable. Air can rise. It's more buoyant. And you get thunderstorms like that. So we've really changed our climate over the summer. Take a look at this. So in the past 4 years, our coast has not seen a warmer period. Not seen a warmer period. We have ocean temperatures that are warm. We have air temperatures that are warm. We've been talking about a drought now for 4 years. Incredible. The state of California, why can El Nino not necessarily just wipe out the drought? The state of California is missing 27 inches of rain. Everywhere. Everywhere. Desert, mountain, if you average it all together. 27 inches of rain. So likely we're going to be in a scenario coming up this winter and spring where we're getting too much of a good thing down here, and we're still talking about drought up north because of the deficits. How much deficit and how unused to rain are you and runoff? We are missing here in Orange County 2 to 2.5 years of rain in 4 years. 2 for 4, that's baseball, right? That's pretty good. But winter, that's a big impact. So right now, and like the chief said, we're still in a threat for Santa Ana's because of the severe drought, let alone the fact that it's fall. So before we get too wet, we're going to have to deal with very dry conditions. Eventually, though, we should be able to saturate things. Look at the numbers here. 32 inches of rain is what we received. Sounds pretty big, right, for Southern California. Our deficit's 32. We would need 45 inches of rain, and let's hope we don't get that this coming year to get back to at least average or get back to normal over the past 4 years. Those are huge deficits. That's a big impact on groundwater, everything, vegetation. So when we talk about El Nino, we do tend to use it as El Nino equals rain equals flooding. And I'll show you some reasons why there is a very good correlation, at least here in Southern California, for that. We like to say at the National Weather Service, and it's been mentioned already, when a road's flooded, turn around, don't drown. When a road is flooded, turn around. You don't know. I've driven in a vehicle in Texas. You know, when you're a meteorologist, you like severe weather. So you tend to play in it a little bit too much. But the water was only 4 or 5 inches deep. It was moving a little bit. And the vehicle started to move. And luckily, I had a very heavy vehicle that was able to get out of it. It doesn't take much. And you don't know what's underneath, if the ground's eroding, or if it's about ready to collapse, or it's very weak. How does El Nino form? Well, for those who like global warming, I'm sorry, El Nino is not global warming. But in the western Pacific, where it's usually really warm, where we get a lot of hurricanes, there's a lot of thunderstorms, very tropical. That region over there gets too warm. It gets too warm. And eventually, it's like spilling over the top. So all the weather is, and all the climate is compensation. Something gets too warm, it tries to cool it off. Something gets too cold, tries to warm it up. High pressure, low pressure. Try to fill in low pressure from high pressure. You create weather. So what happens is all this warmth out here gets too much. It overwhelms the normal trade winds. I think that also was a Tom Hanks. The same thing was a Wilson. Overwhelms the trade winds. And literally, all that warm water is allowed to slide along the equator, hit South America, and pool up like you spill water on the ground. And that sets the stage. All that warmth sets the stage for the ocean to communicate or talk to the jet stream when you hit it in winter. The jet stream starts to drop south. It finds all that warm water. All a jet stream is separation of cold to the north, warm to the south. When you make it warmer to the south, you're enhancing your jet stream and locking it into Southern California. It's been a long time. Here's a photo from Silverado Canyon. But we are starting to see, with what little rain we've had, and we've barely tested our grounds, our hills, our slopes, our beaches, barely tested them. But what little rain we had, we've already started seeing some movement, especially in our fire scars. So with El Nino, since they're not all apples and apples, it would be great if we could tell you, okay, we're going to get 25, 26 inches of rain and just be precise like that. But historically, with a lot of El Ninos, it's ranged quite a bit. But the correlation is still very strong. Take a look at this. So in some of our El Nino years, the strong El Nino years, that's how much rain we got in yellow. It was a little bit more here. These numbers are out of San Diego where the records go back into 1870. But one caveat is, and this is where it can really get us, and what happened in 2010 as well. When you get repeated storms coming through, whether they're weak or moderate, they eventually make an impact, a cumulative impact. You get one big storm or 5 days of really bad weather, a lot of rain, and it can really put things over the top. And the unexpected can happen even if you've planned very well. So the point here is, yeah, we can get some really big storms in El Nino, but we also can get some big storms without it. We combine the two, then we can be in real big trouble. Across the state, it's all over the place. So you will continue to hear that Northern California may not have a very wet year, extreme Northern California. Oregon and Washington, the drought's going to get worse. Meanwhile, down here in Southern California, we should be in that jet stream, that storm track at flight level that'll bring us repeated storm after storm and eventually impact. Some of the rainfall that we've seen, the two big El Ninos that we can compare, 82, 83, 97, 98, those are the two biggest ones. And keep that in mind, because we thought 82, 83 was one of the biggest El Ninos we might ever see, based on scientific studies. Then we had 97, 98, and it was even bigger. And the most important thing, or what's important to you, is that both of those years really delivered, meaning there was a lot of rain, and it was a big impact. In order to really make a dent into the whole long story, D word, the drought, we're also going to need a big snowpack. The good news with El Nino is we have seen some really good snowpacks. You probably saw on the news that Mammoth got a foot of snow. They probably declared victory, winter's over. But Mammoth got more snow the other day than they did between December 26th and February 1st of 2015. That's the heart of the winter. So that's how severe our drought has been, and how much of potentially a shocker a very busy, active winter could be if we're not prepared. But that's why we're here, to get more prepared. This is what the jet stream's been doing over the past 2 years, just completely missing us. Completely missing us. An average of basically that results in high pressure or dry conditions. Here's what typically happens in a strong El Nino. We get a direct hit off the Pacific. Not necessarily from the tropics, but direct hit off the Pacific. So we get storm after storm riding along the path of that jet stream. On the left-hand side is what we have seen. On the right-hand side is what El Nino, especially a strong one, should bring. Complete opposite. This is at flight level, upper part of the atmosphere. And this is what's formed our blob. The atmosphere has been so warm that we've had very little upwelling, very little wind. We've had very little chance for the oceans to do their normal processes and cool down. They just had direct sun day after day after day, winter after winter. On the right-hand side, you can see the flip opposite. All this warmth down here, that comes from the warm ocean heating the atmosphere. And all this cool is attracted to it and gets even further south, and that gradient gets tighter, and that's what forms your powerful jet stream. The most powerful jet stream in the world is in the Pacific Ocean, our backyard. But typically, it's well north of us. It'll pay a visit or two during a good winter, but during an El Nino, it tends to be more locked in right below us. So why is this warm water important compared to this water down here? Well, before El Nino formed on here, we had all this warm water over the past year. This is what it typically looks like, and some of that warm water bleeds up in the Baja. All this warm water here is why we've had a lot of strange species of fish and other floating around, swimming around in our oceans. Incredibly warm water. Here's an image of what's currently going on. This is just satellite data, mostly, and compares it to like long-term mean. You don't need me to tell you what's down here. That is our Godzilla friend. Up here is blob, and there's another blob. Now, this is where the jet stream would be once we lock into place. That jet stream has to go over the warm water. Not El Nino. It has to go over this blob, which is sitting right. Look how warm this water is. It's pretty much off the chart. In Fahrenheit, that would be 5-6 degrees above normal California light. Huge difference. Remember, oceans have big heat capacity. You warm them up just a little bit, and there's big impacts that can occur. So when we have El Nino, on the left-hand side, our region is one of the wettest regions in the United States other than Florida. So we have one of the best correlations with El Nino. Even when you remove the big ones, like the really big ones, 82, 83, 97, 98, we still have a good correlation. Northern California doesn't, though. And that's why they get concerned when it comes to talking about drought and ending it in the north. This is not what we expect, but since science has improved so much, back in '65, they were having a meeting here today. They were entering a strong El Nino. By December, the El Nino completely fizzled, fell apart. The atmosphere responded. The storms retreated. The state ended up very dry, very dry. But this upcoming El Nino, when I show you the next couple slides, you'll see why we don't expect that to happen. In the big El Nino years, the whole state was wet. This would be ideal. It'd be a little too much of a good thing. But that would be a drought buster if we could get a mirror image of what those 2 years produce. And there's high confidence for Southern California, and not so much for the far north. Our friends in University of California, San Diego summed it up. The blue areas mean when you get rain, it's likely resulting from an El Nino year. About a 6 correlation, 60%, so pretty good. The white areas in the middle, here, when you look at this chart, it tells you what about our biggest storms ever, the biggest data storms. We still are in the blue down here, not as bright. But the Sierra Nevada, where a lot of water comes from, has no correlation to the El Nino, whether it's a big storm or any regular storm. Very little correlation. But when you look at all the weak storms, that's the key with El Nino, is a lot of storms. Not necessarily the worst ones ever, but a lot of them. And our area is in deep, deep blue. So with El Nino comes a prolonged, extended winter. We haven't seen a winter in the past 4 years. They're talking about fire weather in March. But with El Nino, that's not what we expect. I'll skip over that one. So what we do expect is the jet stream, and here we are in November, and we're starting to see this already. Don't want to declare victory on the El Nino forecast, but the jet stream should start sagging south across Nevada and California. Then in December, be further south. The key here is what happens in the latter part of the winter. As soon as we get into January, we're thinking, things weren't that bad. Things weren't that bad. When the ocean and the atmosphere really lock into place, and sometimes it takes a while, but once they lock into place, it's hard to separate the two. When the ocean and the atmosphere get locked into place, typically in these strong El Ninos, the latter half of the winter has been very wet. Definitely not something we're used to over the past 5 years or so. How strong is the current El Nino? This is the latest snapshot. If we were to close the business today and call El Nino, over, it would go down as the strongest one ever. Right now, that region, and the reason why I talk about how bad the drought is and how warm it's been and how humid it's been is because the theme of all these extremes, it's hard to look away and ignore them all. And now we're looking at an El Nino. It's not a matter of where is it or is it coming. It's here. Now it's a matter of when will it engage with our jet stream and bring us a lot of storms. The latest value is 2.7 Celsius, almost 6 Fahrenheit. Back in 97, 98, which we once thought was maybe the benchmark, that was 2.3. So we're now at 2.7. And it just formed, too, in May, as you can see. And then through the summer, it's really accelerated. Our computer models that are run all across the world, including our backyard here at UCSD, NASA, NOAA, who I work for, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, say the same thing, basically, that we are going to be locked into a strong El Nino as we get into the heart of the winter, which is important because you want it timed with the peak of your winter, when the jet stream is usually most active, to really excite things. So here's the forecast. So for our region, we are in the best chance for getting significant or very significant rainfall, meaning a lot of storms. Yeah, a few of those will be strong. But the important thing is there will be a lot of them, so things will get very saturated, get a lot of coastal erosion like Kevin was showing. Temperatures will actually be relieved a little bit. We are seeing temperatures that are just off the charts, record-breaking. El Nino actually will be strong enough that it'll probably, by this time next year, set us into a course where we are back to a little bit normal temperatures, normal ocean temperatures, and so forth, because we've been so out of whack. Can't say that for our friends up north, though. They are in for the California drought in the Pacific Northwest, because we're going to be borrowing their jet stream, at least for the near term. Here's a zoomed up version, and it's important to note that it's not just the coast, it's everywhere, and that can affect resources as well. The deserts will see a lot of rain. Of course, the mountains will see more than the deserts, and the mountains will see more than the coast, but everyone is in for it across Southern California. And our region, it's almost like I painted this just for you, right? Orange County, San Diego County, our area of responsibility. But we are in the zone, and that is why we've seen some historically big years like 82, 83, 97, 98. And this could potentially overtop it. I threw in a couple slides here. I wanted to show you what some of our forecasters look at. So before we issue a flood warning or a flash flood warning or activate the emergency alert system, they use Doppler weather radar. There's 2 of them in this area. One's in Miramar, one's at the top of Santa Ana Mountain. You might be able to see it on a good clear day. It looks like a large golf ball on a tee. And we compare what the radar is seeing, which it does pretty good estimates, with what the ground can take and what our streams and basins can take, and where does that water come from. So they look at different guidance. They look at rainfall 1 hour, 3 hour, and 6 hour. And typically, because of your terrain, you have a big catch basin, and you also have areas that are prone to responding quicker to certain amounts of rainfall. So the forecasters are considering that before they actually engage in issuing a warning or a message that would go to your phone or through Alert OC or so forth. And at the same time, they're communicating with emergency management, or maybe the fire department or police department, before they're issuing it or after they're issuing it to make sure they did the right thing. A lot of words. Summary is El Nino is here. It could be the strongest one ever on the books. There's no guarantee that it will result in the worst flooding ever. But there's very high confidence that we're going to engage once we get deeper into the winter with a lot of storms. Something we haven't seen for a long time. We're seeing incredible extremes. Even though El Nino is not global warming, we're seeing incredible extremes with temperature, drought, rain, warm, cold, everything. And we don't know if this is a permanent change or if this is a trend. It appears to be a trend. But since on paper we're looking at potentially the strongest El Nino on record, it's very important that we take it serious and don't look back and say, you know, I wish I had done this. We are encouraging folks, and some of you here probably know, if you live in a floodplain, if you're not sure, go to your favorite website. Here I have the Department of Water Resources, a beautiful map that plots FEMA's 100-year, 200-year floodplain. Check and see if you have flood insurance. If you don't, it might be wise to get it. We just had a conference call the other day. It's really important. You know how someone took those photos? If you're able to take photos in a safe place, when it comes to flooding, you know, if it's chocolatey water like they were showing in the videos, that should be covered under the flood insurance. If it's a whole hillside that comes down, it may not be. But it's important to talk to your insurance agent and make sure you have the coverage, in addition to getting your sandbags and cleaning your drains. We've already had problems in San Diego. We just had them the other day. Debris, leaves, junk, like we clean up in the fall, left in yards. All washed down the other day, Monday night, Tuesday evening, and caused significant flooding in some of the suburbs of San Diego. A lot of that could have been prevented if the debris had been picked up, removed, and put in the proper place. Here's our webpage, weather.gov San Diego. And if you're into monitoring the weather intensely, you want to visit that page. Every single weather station that's available is on that page. It shows you the rain, the wind, the temperature, and so forth. Reminder to check out our Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube feeds. If you're really into climate, or if you don't believe anything I said, check out the Climate Prediction Center, which is part of NOAA, my agency. And that's where I got a lot of those images from. And you can see updates weekly. When it comes to El Nino, we measure the width, so the diameter, but we also measure the depth. And the depth of the warm water ensures us that El Nino is not going away anytime soon. Thanks, everyone.
I will leave this image for a little while so you guys can copy the information down as needed. At this point, we would like to open up a question and answer session for the audience. If you need me to, I will come to your seat and hit the microphone. If that will help out, and you can address the panel.
I had a question for you. In looking at the charts, it appears that the strongest rains will be around February, March timeframe. And if you're predicting massive storms at that time, what do you consider a massive storm? And how many inches of rain do you think might come around February, March timeframe?
That's a good question. I'll repeat it a little bit. So the question and observation was February, March is expected to be the wettest period here for Orange County and Southern California. And how much do we expect in terms of like rainfall? So this area averages, anywhere from 11 to 15 inches of rain a year, a little bit more when you go higher up the hill. And we can expect to probably get close to doubling that. The key is, do we spread it out? If we spread it out from December through March and have a storm a week, and there may not be that much impact, just minor impact. But if it comes all at once, like you were saying, that's difficult to predict. But that's the part we got to prepare for. Even some of our El Niños that didn't materialize into big numbers, like 20, 25 inches of rain, even the ones that didn't materialize into that, they did produce some months that were just really wet. And when it all comes out at once, you have a lot of problems. So it's hard to put a number, but yeah, a good guess would be up around 20 inches of rain here. Maybe a little bit more. It's certainly not out of the question. That would be conservative, probably saying 20. But don't get that confused with thinking that we might just get this mega storm in February, March. The expectations are more likely that we would just get a lot of storms. If we do get a mega storm, those are only predictable 7 to 10 days out. And that's when it's important to be engaged. The questions that we'll start getting is, how much rain have we already got? We already have unstable grounds here. We've got a little flooding there. What's next? Because we can't take much more, or how much are we going to get? Maybe we can take that. It's typically 5 to 10 days when you can see the whites of the eyes of a really big storm.
You've been raising your hand the entire time, so I assume your question's very
How many storms do you think we're gonna get this year?
It's a great question. So on your little hand, we could probably count how many storms we got last year. Literally, 4 or 5. With an El Nino of this magnitude and expectations and historically what we've seen, 20 to 25 storms. We've already seen one, so chalk up one. That was the other night. But realistically, yeah, you're going to double, triple. You can't compare the last 2 years because those are way below normal. So normally we get, and it's been so long, 10 or 12 storms, but you can double that with a strong El Nino.
Road on Coast Highway going to be affected below Elmora?
Yes.
I think I do.
In 97, 98, that road and that El Nino, we almost lost all entrances into the city. We have freeways in, freeways out. 97, 98, we lost the canyon. We lost Coast Highway in the north end because of the landslide there, right around Elmora on that short cliff there. And we had some issues there in South Laguna. And so it's just hard to say, but it's possible. And as Alex talked about getting resources in, that's one of our concerns if we lose our interest in ingress and egress. So it's possible, but again, we'll have skip loaders and public works personnel on duty, and hopefully we'll get it down as quickly as possible.
This is for the fire chief. My property is at Forest and Glenary, which when it floods, there's a nice lake there. So the problem is that after the lake is there and our flood barriers are up and they're working, cars continue to drive through that area, including fire trucks. So how can we get the road to be closed and maybe put a notice to the fire department to use alternate routes and not drive through that lake? Because what happens is that it creates waves which come over the flood barriers and which gets water into the building.
Hopefully, the police department will get closed down for residential or non-emergency traffic. For emergency traffic, unfortunately, we don't have to go, we don't have to go haven't heard this issue before, and so I'll go ahead and share it, and I'll let our individuals of the problem that you experience.
You could go Third Street.
Yeah, there is a lot happening. That's why I said, we haven't heard specifically of us impacting that, but I also will share that.
I live in the canyon, so the channel is of great interest and concern to me. If a car washes in there, will you have the means to get it out?
Probably not until the rain stops and the water subsides. And again, that's part of our purpose being here tonight is educating and training. When you park your car, as I talked about, is important. And so we can't get that through to enough people. It's dangerous, we can't go in that moving water, and so we're gonna have to let the water subside, that's what we have to do in 2010, and then we can go in there and really want it to breathe. So casually, no, not until the water's clear.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions, and the first one may not be really answerable, but if in the warning system, what is your best guess about how long a warning we might get about, I mean, your big storm, 7 to 10 days, but my concern is, let's say there's a necessity for evacuation. If we're having, like 20, 25 storms, it's impossible to stay close to home for months through 25 storms. But if you're 2 hours away from home and your dog, just for example, is at your house, right? How long a warning do we get? I mean, I get that one point of view there would be like, lucky you, you're 2 hours away from home, you already evacuated, well done, right? But I mean, that what's going to happen, and has already happened in past storms, is people come back anyway. And if the roads are closed, they come back anyway. And if the channel is overflowing, they come back anyway. So, how long a warning might we get? I mean, is there any answer to that?
I guess when we come back anyway, if you're a law enforcement, we need to stay off those road closures and not let people come out. People take themselves at risk and put rescuers at risk. And I understand that there are people who may be trapped around us, but you're not helping the situation if you're able to go past one of those. So I just want to clarify that and emphasize that it's important. People get in bad positions and put rescuers in bad positions. And we're trying to educate them not to do that. We'll risk a lot to save a lot. We'll risk a little for the world, but we'll risk nothing for nothing. How much notification? I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you. One of the issues with the National Weather Service is it talked about radar in the rainfall pages, is that's one of the ways that we can kind of help predict. But just as we only have 3 days there, we don't have rain gauges on the Pacific Ocean. So it's hard to get some of that great intelligence, and all we really have is radar. So we're working with the National Weather Service, looking at our saturations levels, and I would guess now like an hour, we should be able to see out an hour of a significant cell that's hitting our area, and then we can try to hit the awareness at that time.
I think we'll also, and we have done in the past, that we want to notify those that are in the flood area, the canyon, the downtown businesses. We're going to pass that information along as soon as we know. If we know there's a storm coming up this weekend, we're going to tell the people to put up their floodgates. We've done that in the past. We continue will. So as soon as we know information, we aren't going to be shy at sharing it.
Do we have any city maps, similar to topographical maps that show us the water flow as we've known it in the past, so we can plan around the water flow?
I don't know, would be a Steve May question.
Yeah, as Chief Lieutenant said, it would probably be the Director of Public Works would have that answer. So that would be Steve May. you can contact him. All his information's on the city website. You can talk to, again, Steve May, the director, that could maybe share those types of maps with you.
The schedule of the storms is sometime between November and March. Is there, typically they come more from December to March. Is there a sweet spot where you would expect to see more storms than other? I'm sure it's some kind of curve.
Yeah, the peak, like similar to what you look at, like with hurricanes or tornadoes, like the peak season. With a strong El Nino, it's typically your February, March. That's your plateau. And it doesn't drop off immediately. What we've seen with some of the strong El Ninos is that we're prone to not as many, but still a significant storm even in April. And eventually even a cooler summer and back to some normalcy. But that's your peak, February, March. And because of these El Ninos that we've had, they do tend to skew our average, our normals. Our normals have been all over the place the past 4 years, but at least with a strong El Nino, it's February, March.
I live in Beverly, which is a hill, and there's a house on one side it's above mine, and a house on the other side is below. How likely, am I going to be affected by flooding, or how likely is it?
Without actually going to your house and looking at it, it's hard for me to answer. Have you had flooding there in the past? No. If you haven't had flooding there in the past, then the drainage around it probably is pretty good. And probably, Laguna, I'm not aware of that many problems. We had some problems in 2010 with Laguna, up elevation of the water district was done. We believe that's all been resolved, and we shouldn't have those issues again. But if you want to call a fire department or no one surrender, we can come up and take a look. I mean, we can't make any guarantees, but we can try to look at the drainage. You need to prepare your house as best you can, and have, make sure the low spots, everything is cleared out, the drains are cleared, and so forth. But is it going to flood? I can't answer that if someone goes there, and that's not going to be a guarantee.
Are tsunamis ever a part of the El Nino process, or is that an entirely different phenomenon?
That's a fair question. With tsunami planning, it used to be that storm surge or impact from incoming Pacific systems wasn't really given much credit. Now it is, and it is factored in now. But to answer your question, no, tsunamis aren't related to it. Though you do get a storm surge, which is similar to a tsunami, accumulation, a lifting, a buildup of water from big swells and surf, and just the actual water level rising as these storms come in. 90% of tsunamis are directly related to earthquakes.
Thank you. On December 22nd, 2010, I live on St. Anne's. So the water came down the park, turned on St. Anne's, left right behind the high school, went to my house, turned left, and went down to the street below me, flooded that 4 feet. And I went out about 3:30 because I heard them talking. I never got a call from anyone, but the water next to my house was up past my ankles when I went out to see what was going on. Will you come out to see if there's anything I can do with sandbag? And to keep it away, or to keep it going down the street?
We learned a lot from 2010 where I wish Steve May, the Director of Public Works, was here. We went on a tour with him at the city a couple of weeks ago, and we talked specifically about what happened in that neighborhood in 2010. And the city believes that they have solved that problem and it should not happen again. As you go up Park Avenue, it's interesting to know right after Lake Terrace there, and you look on both sides of the street, there's like 7 or 8 storm drains going up the street and kind of go, well, that's kind of odd. Why are there so many storm drains there? It's to handle the capacity of the water as it comes down Park Avenue. And so since 2010, they have added water. They have redesigned the storm drain at the very where the residential area is. They put a block wall up in there and they increased the capacity. And so the public works director believes that what happened in 2010 will not happen again. These builders know that it was a problem in 2010, and we hope that we can send notifications out there. So I guess that's the best I can tell you.
Well, I know that last week or 2 weeks ago when we had that rainstorm, it did still go past greenhouse and down, because the top part of my backyard was down. It took mud and took it down to the second terrace. Already, just 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, we had yesterday.
Where did that water come from Park and the drain?
It came down St. Anne's. So I guess it's from Park, because it comes down Park, turns on St. Anne's, it passes those 3 houses under the 4th.
I guess my recommendation would be to use to contact our city engineer and see if he can have someone come out and look at the issue that you have specifically on that area. Because from what he explained to us, the concern with flooding and our law enforcement, our police officers made some rescues down there in 2010, and we all know that it was a bad problem, and the city invested a lot to try to work through and ensure that wouldn't happen.
The city engineer.
Steve Lane.
So, I wanted to ask about the, fire burn area from July 3rd, that's sort of directly across from the entry to Canyon Acres. I see that I can see that the parks and that the city has done some work there. And I see that there's a sort of barrier that I guess is supposed to hold debris flow. But, I actually can't remember which flood it was, but maybe it was 1978, and we had the fatalities and I mean, sorry,
97, I did.
Yeah. We had big mud flows down there and everywhere, but that brought the power pole down, right? Because there was nothing for it to stay in, because the slope was basically liquid. So the power pole came down across the road. A number of other things went wrong at that same night, but now we've got that narrow canyon there that's directly where the burn was. You're gonna get a lot of water channeling down like that little angle and aiming towards that power pole. I mean, I guess I can see that some things have been done, but I don't know, I guess I'm sort of semi-asking the question and semi-giving a sort of heads up. But if, are we gonna get the power pole down across the road again, then I'm good. It looks like the same road will move.
I wish I could stand up here and give guarantees on what's going is going to happen, but unfortunately, I'm not able to do that. I can't predict what will or will not happen, but I can tell you that since the July 3rd, 2015 fire in the county, at Canyon Acres of the Village Road, we have been working with Caltrans, we've been working with the city, we have been working with Orange County Parks, we've been working with Orange County Public Works, and Orange County Flood Control to come up with a plan to mediate the area. After the September 16, 2012 fire behind Ruby's, the plan on that fire was to hydroseed the area. And so when you hydroseed, there are some that believe that puts like a coating on there and it will help to repel the water. The parks, Orange County Parks, did not want hydroseed. They felt it was better with their geologists that to let it flow. And they have put some hay bales in there and some, I'm trying to think of the name for the round tubes of them. Swallows up in the hillside. They cleaned out the drain. It was interesting. We went and looked at the drain right there that goes under the Laguna Road after the fire, and it was 2/3 full. And so that drain has been completely opened up. And so they want the debris to flow through it. They don't want to stop it, because if you stop it, then you create a dam. and enough water gets put in the dam, and the dam gets free. That's actually what happened in December '98 at the Quilter's home. There was a dam above their house, it stopped the water, the dam broke free, and it all came shutting through, and it ended tragically there. But they believe what they've done, preparing that burn scar from July 3rd is the appropriate, most effective means. We'll have to wait and see.
Thank
I was just wondering, you kind of hit on it with the hydroseeding. I'm just wondering with the drought that the soil would be pretty hydrophobic and not acceptable to water. And I'm wondering if the big sort of push for the rains are coming, I mean, I know it's hard to predict, but February, March, maybe there should be some education, public education about providing some erosion control, sort of hydroseed in areas that maybe have slopes behind your home, or I know that they just took down a lot of the eucalyptus along Wilson Street below the high school, right below the baseball field or whatever. And so that might be something that I look at that thinking, okay, that's probably gonna come down. They have walls, but maybe there should be some hydroseeding, because that can sort of happen and grow as it rains and sink the water a little bit, maybe sort of hold it in place when that big one comes, the big storm sort of back to back in February. So I don't know if anybody's talked about that or.
I'll try to answer that, I guess, as best as I can. I think that's what we're trying to do every day is provide that public education. And when the city has so much responsibility on their private property, they need to take care of their private property. And that's what we're trying to get across here tonight. Go away. Size up your property, size up your business, try to understand where water flows. We can see what we can do to protect your property prior to the storm. And so I know that, I think we just left, I know that was out of order. We're reporting every night. And so a lot of what we talked about, we'll hopefully be in the local newspaper here in the next week. But your point is well taken. That's what we're trying to cover is preparedness, what we can do ahead of the storm so that we don't have any issues during the storm.
I live right on the beach near Grass, and I'm wondering, there was mention made earlier tonight as far as the maximum storm surge. And is there a good confidence limit on what we could see as far as that maximum water level that's coming in from the city?
Where did you say you lived? I'm sorry.
Crest Street.
Crest Street? Okay. Just on the north side of the, or on the
Right up
point?
So a couple factors, and I'll hand it over to Kevin too. It's all about timing. So it's not just a storm surge. Typically, a storm surge, even with a series of storms, is going to be maybe a foot, usually about 6 inches. It's the timing with high tide and then the amount of rain that's running off at the same time. You get the three together, and that's your worst case scenario. But it's hard to say if those three will ever line up. You know, the high tide, the max runoff, and then the storm surge at the same time. The odds are much higher because of repeated storms, though.
Thanks, I think you answered the question, but I'm just curious there, at Crest Street, most of the houses are pretty high, except for 2 or 3 that are just on the north side of the actual Crest Street point.
Well, yeah, so I'm just north where those concrete piers are holding up the ocean side of the property.
Correct.
That's me.
Okay. We're going to be making a visit out to 3 to 5 different residents within the city, and we'll put you on the list and stop by and make contact with you. I can get some information from you tonight.
Great, thank you.
Something I forgot to do as the MC of this workshop is to thank everybody for coming here. We really certainly appreciate your attendance and your involvement in the community. We're still here to answer questions for you, but I forgot to thank everyone for attending, as after half the people left. So we're still going to take questions. So.
David.
I have a couple of questions. One, I'm wondering what the city's plan is for checking on the storm drain inlet as well as the outflow and making sure that the drain lines are clear prior to the season in areas where there are storm drains.
Finding south of them specifically, near Birch Street, and there is a storm drain inlet right across from mine.
It's my understanding that all the storm drains have already been inspected, including myself and Hannah. As I mentioned earlier, I did go on a tour with the public works director. We took me up around Sunset Terrace, or Sunset Drive, up to the hospital, we looked around a couple of them coming from the hillside. We talked about what the work they've done there, so the city has already gone through and touched all of those. Another thing that the water quality department is doing is they're actually seeing where manhole covers. And, that was interesting for me to learn why and how they do that. And the reason is one, they don't want water getting into the sewer system because that would go down in the sewer treatment plant. And two, they want the sewer system can't go very well. They don't want to be popping our storm drain or something and having it disposed. So also, as part of our perpetual work, the manhole covers for the sewer system have been secured.
Along with that, are you also walking some of the drainage courses where people might be building nearby? And what sort of provisions are there in place for alerting people who have building projects going on and leaving debris down near the drainage areas?
I know through our weekly meetings with our department head staff team that the building department and the building inspectors are making contact with our construction sites. One of the things that if you look at a construction site, things that are running around the way, is during the dry season, the contractors cover up the storm drains. They're really good. There's a way to get in there and get over the ocean. From the water quality perspective, it's part of the requirement for water quality. So when the storm is coming in, they have to remove those and open up the storm drain so that the storm drain station is designed to. And so the building inspectors have been instructed and trained and looking at the storm comes in, we're going to go hit these construction sites and ensure that everything is open and ready to go. And that the appropriate signage in place to keep the drain hopefully on site and not getting to the city, the regular park. So, we've done our preparatory work, we make that communication, and the inspectors have been instructed and trained, and so we're going to go ready.
I live in Bluebird, and when you were doing your tour, did you find any weaker areas that still need to be addressed? Or concerns about exiting?
I would say that we found weaker areas, we just understand candidly that the city's drainage system has so much capacity. And it's going to get overwhelmed. They're not going to be able to stop the flow. That's the end of their intent. If anything, the sandbags are trying to divert the flow, but we need to let it go. Trying to stop it is a bad thing. And any blockages in the drainage are a bad thing. So the goal is to get the water out of here, not necessarily as quickly as possible. That's one of the things on the third storm that they did was try to slow the water down. And so that's a technique that they use to try to better control it and keep it confined. But nothing that I would say, here's a red flag, this is going to be a problem, but just understanding the limitations of the system.
Yes, The rains of 2010, I live at Lower Temple Hills by Thalia. The storm drains failed and our house got flooded as the water came down Temple Hills and surged over the, I'm going to call it the west curve, down a drainage course, down Thalia and around Temple Terrace and into my house. I'm wondering whether we have any information about the storm drain and its functionality at Lower Temple Hills by Thalia. If that's an area that is problematic, should I contact Steve May or the fire department to come up with a strategy to protect my house?
Again, I'm not familiar with the storm drain failing. I guess the question would be, did it fail or did it get overwhelmed? If it got overwhelmed, again, that's a problem with our capacity. But the best person to talk to in your specific incident would be Steve May. And he would have the history and knowledge of the storm drain system.
So he would help me to strategize like where I should put sandbags, for instance, to divert the water away from my house.
I would hope our public works department would be able to assist you with some information.
So that's Steve May.
That would be Steve May, correct.
We know that the channel gridlocks, right there at, in between Ocean and Broadway on Beach Street, have we got any plans for putting some type of barriers around the Verizon building to intentionally direct the water down Ocean and Broadway so as it doesn't flood the businesses? Help it go the direction it wants to go.
That door on the beach side of the Verizon building has actually been removed and it's been sealed completely. So from the perspective of the beach is right there, it goes over the beach and hits the Verizon building, shouldn't be an issue with it getting in there. Right now, there's a trailer generator there that we're probably going to have to look at moving that. And that's with some other issues going on in that building. That might have to be relocated or, addressed prior to. I'm not familiar with any discussion or plan of putting any kind of barricade to try to keep it off of Ocean. But essentially, again, we want to let it flow. So it's got two places to go, Broadway and Ocean. And so essentially what we're saying is when the road flows, with the storm goes, those basically become the channels for the river. And so we've got to get the water out of the system, out of there. And so that's the only two options for it. So.
Has anyone made contact with either the National Guard or Camp Pendleton on vehicles that can be used in the canyon area for rescues, such as Amtrak or smaller LTACs?
Specifically from the city perspective, we have not. Jordan, I don't know if you want to talk about the OA and everything, just a quick overview of how that would work. But we, in our planning, if we have to call in resources, we know one of the resources that is going to be beneficial is going to be the Orange County Sheriff's Department Search and Rescue Team. And they do have horses and other resources that are available to us. Given the military, it becomes more problematic. But Jordan can go into just a quick overview of the structure.
Absolutely. So there's the operational area in Orange County that's led by the Sheriff's Department. Any of our requests from the city of needs that we have funnels through them. They try to fill that need from our own operational areas, such as their search and rescue teams, swiftwater rescue teams, and they go out and look for those resources when we have that hole and they fill it for us. We're not going to go direct to the military operation and ask for it. We're going to go through the operational area, which is the proper channels for us to get those resources.
What vehicles do you have available that can be put on the ground in Laguna Canyon to prepare for any type of evacuation of people in a flowing river environment where a fire truck can't go? Such as, a vehicle similar to an Amtrak or a personnel carrier. I'm worried about our canyon residents.
And that's where it comes to the notification. I think I would like to continue to reiterate starting notifications, and we're gonna know a little bit in advance when these storms are coming. register on our Alert OC, make sure you get all of our notifications. We're gonna pass it in advance so everyone knows. We're gonna communicate that with people so they can get out. As far as staging any type of military vehicle or Humvee or anything that can go through the canyon waters, you know, it might not even be safe for them, but I don't know their capacity, and I don't know if Chief can.
So you don't have vehicles like that then?
The city does not have a vehicle like that, and it would be unsafe to put a person in the environment that we showed in those videos. Even in 2010, we found resources that are available to us in the county, and that is a swiftwater rescue team that has boats and rowboats, motorboats, jet ski capability, and in our environment, our canyon is not like another, area that floods. It's so compact, there's so much debris in there, it moves so fast, and there's not room to maneuver that, as Jordan said, get to a high place, relocate early, and we're going to have to wait for the water to subside before we can get in there and effect a rescue. That's our plan. There's nothing else that we can do. We do not have any other resources, and that's why we're here tonight, focusing on the training, focusing on early notification, and getting ourselves ready so that we are self-sufficient, because unfortunately, we're not going to be able to cross these rivers.
But the military can, and the Orange County Sheriff's can, they've got the tools to do it.
I don't think the Orange County Sheriff would be able to get across what we have in our communities. The military might have it, but we can't access the military.
For the canyon residents, we need to have a vehicle or type of vehicle to get to those residents in those conditions. It's not a debatable issue, that is a need. And you've reiterated, you can't get to it because of the restriction of the design of the fire truck. So that tells me you're lacking a very valuable resource that you have the training and the ability to use if it was available to you.
Well, first of all, we're not trained just for fire rescue, sir. I'm sorry. We don't have that resource. We're trying to get this training across tonight, early notification, get to a high spot, maybe area, get to a safe area, and we're going to have to wait out until the rain subsides.
What would you recommend that we get sandbags and when are they available?
The sandbags currently are available to the fire station and fill. The plan right now for the big sandbags is about a week before the first storm is going to come in. So we're about a week out.
On the new website that's gonna come out here in the next couple of weeks under the police department and emergency preparedness, we have a site specifically for sandbags. So we're gonna pass along that information through there, through social media, through press releases as well. So when those are available for residents, we're gonna make sure we pass it along as much as possible so everyone can prepare. And it has been at least 7 to 10 days, like the chief said, so that it gives enough time for those individuals to go prepare. Go ahead, sir.
Last question. Is there any areas in the city that have been set aside, for example, let's say we know that we have a storm coming in 7 days. Do we have like a flat raised area in some place in the canyon where we can say we're gonna send a city vehicle there loaded with water and minimal supplies, and that can be a temporary rescue area, above what we think may be the floodplain area?
I think that comes down, the city has not done that. I think that comes down to personal preparedness, and people need to take that upon themselves to be prepared. And if they're in an area where they're in that danger, that you need to take steps to either have friends or family around and get the supplies that you need and stay tuned to alerts, and that you can leave the area if necessary. I think we're small.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, just say as a, like, I'm the president of CANDO, the Canyon Alliance of Neighborhood Defense Organization, and just thinking about that, I so appreciate that people are worried about us, we're very worried about us, but that particular plan of having like a raised evacuation thing, the places that are hills, only a few people would be there, and everybody else would have to come through the canyon floor to get to that hill. Right.
We're gonna want people to evacuate. If
Yeah,
it's those types of conditions, we're not gonna be having people on.
even if we wanted to do that, I don't think there is no spot on a hill in Laguna Canyon that people could get to safely. Because to get there, they'd have to go through the canyon floor and up a sliding hillside. It just wouldn't be like a safe, like that would not be the safe evacuation plan. It would be like, let's have supplies there, right? The safe evacuation plan would be, we yeah.
All right, with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. Thank you guys again for coming. Really appreciate it.